When Linda banned my nephew from the neighborhood pool, I didn't even know her name. 6 months later, I knew her bank account details and her entire history of corruption. That shift, from a clueless neighbor to a forensic investigator, happened because Linda Morrison made one crucial mistake. She decided to pick a fight with a retired construction lawyer who had spent 2 decades dismantling fraud schemes and who had nothing left to lose after losing his wife. At 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, I stood in my doorway wearing my bathrobe, steam curling from my coffee cup, facing 2 confused police officers and one very smug woman in tennis whites. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with Linda's overpowering vanilla perfume should have warned me this wasn't about pool rules anymore. What would you do if your HOA Linda tried to weaponize the police against you? Share your worst HOA story in the comments. And before we dig deeper, where are you watching from? I'm curious how many of you are dealing with neighborhood tyrants right now. My name is Daniel Alvarez, and 8 months ago I thought I was moving to heaven on earth. Willow Creek Estates, 127 immaculate homes, built between 2019 and 2021, complete with a $400,000 community pool that glistened like a jewel under the morning sun. I paid a premium for the corner lot with the pool view, $750,000, when similar homes were selling for $650,000. Worth every penny, I thought, especially after watching my wife Elena battle cancer for 3 long years. She passed away last October. The house we had shared for 22 years became a museum of memories, so I packed up and moved to Willow Creek to begin again. I had retired from construction law after 20 years of fighting contractor fraud, and I figured I had earned a little peace and quiet. Each morning I sat in my kitchen with a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise reflect across that pool's surface, listening to early swimmers slice through the water with steady rhythm. It was meditation in motion, exactly what my grief counselor had suggested. That's when I first noticed her. Linda Morrison, 48 years old, real estate agent, vice president of the HOA, and owner of the model home that anchored the community. Always in designer workout clothes, her blonde highlights perfectly maintained, carrying that damn binder everywhere, as if she were running a Fortune 500 company instead of a suburban association. She was married to City Councilman Greg Morrison, which meant she knew all the right people and never let anyone forget it. The first few months were blissfully Linda-free. I kept to myself, followed every rule to the letter, and slowly began to feel human again. Then summer came, and with it, my nephew Alex. Alex is 16, my brother's kid from Phoenix, sharp as a tack, heading to engineering school in the fall, and the closest thing to a son I'll ever have. Elena and I never had kids, too busy with work and later too focused on her treatments. Alex was spending his summer with me working at the local hardware store and keeping his old uncle company. The trouble began on a Tuesday in June. Alex had invited 2 friends from his summer job over for a day at the pool. Nice kids, polite, the kind who actually say, "Thank you, Mr. Alvarez," without being prompted. They'd been there maybe an hour and a half, laughing, splashing, the kind of harmless noise teenagers make. That's when Linda appeared, clipboard in hand, like some kind of HOA Grim Reaper. The sharp smell of chlorine blended with her suffocating vanilla perfume into a nauseating cloud as she approached. "Excuse me," she announced loud enough for the entire pool area to hear. "I need to see guest passes for these young men." Guest passes? I'd lived there for 8 months and had never once heard of guest passes. "They're family," I explained evenly. "This is my nephew Alex, and these are his coworkers." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Rules are rules, Mr. Alvarez. HOA bylaws clearly state that excessive guest usage, anything more than 2 guests per household per week, requires pre-registration and approved passes." I offered to register the boys as extended visitors. That seemed reasonable. But Linda wasn't interested in reasonable. "No exceptions," she declared, consulting her clipboard like it contained sacred commandments. "Pool privileges are immediately suspended for Lot 47 pending compliance review." The creak of pool chairs echoed as other residents suddenly found their phones fascinating. The musty weight of fear hung in the air. No one wanted to be Linda's next target. Alex and his friends quietly gathered their towels, embarrassed and confused. That evening, Linda posted an official notice on the community board. Pool privileges suspended for Lot 47 pending compliance review. She even announced it at the weekly HOA meeting, emphasizing my supposed failure to follow rules, with just enough theatrical disappointment to make it clear who the villain was meant to be. Sitting in that basement community room, surrounded by nervous neighbors and the smell of stale coffee, I realized this wasn't about pool rules at all. This was about power, control, and putting the newcomer in his place. Linda had just made her first mistake. She had picked a fight with someone who had spent 20 years dismantling bullies, hiding behind fine print. Linda didn't waste time turning the heat up. 3 days after the pool incident, an official letter appeared in my mailbox, certified no less. She'd scheduled a compliance hearing with the HOA board and given me exactly 48 hours notice. The session was set for Thursday at 7 p.m. Thursday was Elena's birthday. I'd planned to visit her grave, maybe bring the sunflowers she loved, and spend quiet time telling her about Alex and how proud she'd be of the young man he was becoming. The letter cited multiple violations I'd apparently overlooked. Trash bins visible from the street, they weren't. Lawn height exceeding 3.5 inches. I'd measured 3.2. And my personal favorite, failure to maintain community harmony through appropriate guest management. That night, I did what any competent lawyer does when facing a hostile opponent. I studied the fine print. I read every page of the HOA papers I'd signed at closing, plus the original founding charter. 2 decades in construction law teach you that the devil lounges in the details, and Linda had just handed me a trail to her weak points. Buried on page 47 of the charter, I struck gold. Reasonable accommodation shall be provided for family gatherings and multi-generational household activities. Linda's guest policy directly contradicted the core document she loved to cite. Better yet, her official notice flubbed at least 3 procedural requirements: insufficient notice, failure to specify the exact bylaw allegedly violated, and scheduling during what any reasonable person would consider a family emergency time frame. Thursday evening, I walked into Linda's dining room, because apparently we were conducting official HOA business in her private home, carrying a manila folder with every relevant page highlighted and tabbed. The lavender air freshener was so overpowering, I wondered if it was masking something else. Maybe the stench of misconduct has a scent. The board looked uncomfortable. Henry Cole, the president and a recently retired high school teacher, kept shifting in his chair. Paula Reyes, our treasurer and a no-nonsense accountant, took notes with the intensity of someone building a record. Greg Morrison wasn't there, probably wise enough to preserve deniability. Linda opened with a PowerPoint. I'm not joking. Actual slides about safeguarding community standards and protecting property values. Every third slide included a thinly veiled reference to certain residents who didn't understand our way of life. The tap-tap of her manicured nails on the mahogany table set an irritating tempo that matched her patronizing tone. When she finished the performance, I stood and began placing documents on the table. Before we proceed, I said evenly, I need to note several procedural defects in tonight's hearing. First, HOA business can't be conducted in a board member's home without prior public notice. Second, the 48-hour notice violates the bylaw's 7-day minimum requirement for compliance hearings. Third, the alleged violations in her letter don't match any specific bylaw text. Henry looked up. Daniel, are you saying this hearing isn't valid? I'm saying if we're going to enforce rules, we should probably follow them ourselves. I opened the folder and slid forward the highlighted charter pages. According to the foundational document we all agreed to, quote, reasonable accommodation shall be provided for family gatherings and multi-generational household activities. My nephew's pool afternoon with 2 friends fits squarely within that protection. Color crept into Linda's face. That language is outdated. We've since updated. With respect, Linda, I said, the original charter can only be changed by a community-wide vote. Has there been such a vote? Silence. Paula shook her head. Here's where Linda made her critical mistake. Instead of acknowledging the procedural mess and rescheduling a proper hearing, she pivoted to a personal jab. Perhaps Mr. Alvarez is struggling to adjust after his recent loss. Maybe the stress of learning new rules is too much. The room fell silent. Even her supporters looked uneasy. You could hear the air conditioner cycling in the distance. I gathered my papers, slowly, deliberately. Thank you for your time. I'll continue reviewing the charter and we'll be in touch. The vote was 4-2 to uphold the pool suspension, with Henry and Paula dissenting. But something had shifted. Linda had shown her true face, and the board had glimpsed what they were dealing with. That night, I opened my laptop and started the kind of deep dive I hadn't done since my last major construction fraud case. HOA formation documents, municipal filings, Linda's real estate transaction history, everything public if you know where to look. By 2 a.m., I found the first thread. Linda Morrison. Realty was the exclusive sales agent during Willow Creek's build-out. Exclusivity like that usually comes with incentives. Time to see exactly what those incentives were. Linda's next move came quicker than I expected. Within a week, she launched what she called a neighborhood watch patrol. 3 residents armed with clipboards and cameras, documenting every minor deviation from HOA rules. Suddenly, people were receiving violation notices for things that had gone unnoticed for years. Basketball hoops stored in garages but visible through windows, garden gnomes over the 2-decoration limit, Christmas lights still hanging in July. But I was clearly getting special treatment, daily drive-bys, photographs of my property from multiple angles, even printed warnings tucked under the windshield wipers of visitors. Alex tried to laugh it off, joking that Linda was stalking us, but I could see it weighed on him. A 16-year-old shouldn't have to worry about causing trouble just by being around his uncle. The harassment was working as intended, too. Neighbors who once waved now buried their faces in their phones when I walked by. The community was splitting, newer residents backing Linda's standards, longtime homeowners whispering their concerns in hushed voices at the grocery store. Yeah. That's when Paula Reyes approached me during a morning walk. She's small but sharp, the kind of accountant who could detect an inconsistency from a mile away. "Daniel," she said softly, glancing around as if we were plotting a heist. "We need to talk. The HOA's finances don't add up." While Linda played security guard, I did what construction lawyers do best: followed the money. I installed discrete security cameras around my property, completely legal in Texas, and began logging her patrols. Every drive-by, every photo, every intimidation attempt, all time-stamped. Here's a legal nugget most residents don't know. HOA enforcement requires written warnings before penalties can be issued. Linda's verbal harassment and immediate pool ban had already broken due process under state law. Takeaway: document everything. HOA board members can be personally liable for procedural violations. I also began building quiet alliances. Henry Cole shared stories of families who had moved away rather than deal with Linda's tyranny. Paula hinted at financial irregularities but said she needed time to compile evidence. The flashpoint came on a Friday afternoon. Alex and his friends followed every rule, using the pool only during family hours. They were quietly enjoying themselves when Linda stormed in with her clipboard and 2 patrol volunteers in tow, barking, "Exit the pool immediately. Lot 47 remains suspended." The boys complied. Alex had already coached them not to escalate. But Linda wasn't satisfied. She followed them to my house, her entourage at her heels, voices growing louder with every step. By the time they reached my driveway, half the neighborhood was peeking from windows. Linda was in full performance mode, gesturing wildly, declaring that certain types of people didn't understand community standards. My legal instincts took over. Instead of shouting, I pulled out my phone and pressed record. "Linda," I said calmly, "the HOA is legally required to provide equal access to amenities for residents in good standing. Which bylaw justifies this ongoing suspension?" She ignored the question, ranting instead. "This is about more than pool rules, Mr. Alvarez. It's about people who fit our community values and people who don't." 3 neighbors stepped outside, visibly disturbed. Mrs. Lee shook her head in disgust. The Johnsons, a young black couple who'd moved in last spring, exchanged knowing looks. "If you can't control your guests," Linda continued, oblivious to the audience, "maybe this community isn't right for you." That night, I emailed the board a formal harassment complaint with the recording attached, complete with timestamps, witness statements, and a clear pattern of behavior. The professionalism of the report left no room for spin. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Linda's defense was predictable. She was protecting the community from outside influences. But when the vote came on whether to formally censure her, it ended 3-3, with Linda abstaining. No action was taken, but the tide had shifted. After the meeting, Paula slipped me a manila envelope. "Look at the construction contracts versus actual costs," she whispered. "Tell me what you see." That night, I spread the papers across my dining room table. What I saw made my lawyer's blood run cold. The HOA had been billed $2.1 million for community amenities that had only cost $1.4 million to build. $700,000 had vanished. And Linda Morrison Realty had been involved in every single transaction. The smoking gun was hiding in plain sight. Buried in the stack of files Paula had saved for years was an email thread between Linda and the original developer, Sunset Builders. The subject line read, "Revised Amenity Pricing Confidential." My construction lawyer instincts lit up immediately. The HOA's original budget listed $2,100,000 for amenities: the pool, community center, playground, landscaping. But the invoices in Paula's files showed the actual costs at only $1,400,000. The $700,000 difference had simply vanished. And then, the kicker, Paula pulled out bank records showing large, irregular deposits into Linda's personal account during the exact months those inflated HOA payments went to Sunset. Her commissions were 4 times higher than industry norms. Even worse, one email Linda thought she had deleted detailed profit-sharing arrangements with Sunset for padded budgets that would later be recouped through HOA dues. It was textbook fraud, the kind I had spent years unraveling. "This isn't about pool access anymore," I told Paula, my voice steady. "This is about long-term financial theft from every family here." Paula nodded grimly. "And it's worse than that. The landscaping contract, the pool service, even snow removal. They're all overpriced by 30 to 40%. Linda gets kickbacks from every vendor." The pattern was undeniable. Linda's obsession with enforcing rules wasn't about standards. It was about silencing anyone who might uncover her scheme. And I had become her biggest threat because of my legal background. "Why didn't you bring this to the board earlier?" I asked. Paula sighed. "Because Linda controls the board. Henry's honest, but he's outnumbered. The rest are either scared or benefiting from her deals. I needed someone with legal expertise to understand what we were actually looking at." The irony wasn't lost on me. Her campaign to shut me down had motivated me to dig. And in doing so, I had uncovered the very corruption she wanted hidden. So we formed a plan. Building a fraud case requires 3 things: evidence, allies, and patience. I had spent 20 years perfecting all 3. Paula brought the financial forensics, Henry added board legitimacy and credibility, and I contributed the legal strategy. Our first strategy session took place in my living room on a Tuesday night. The smell of Paula's homemade tamales filled the room as we spread documents across the coffee table like generals plotting a campaign. "This isn't random theft," I explained, pointing to the financial timeline. "It's a coordinated embezzlement scheme with 3 streams of revenue: inflated construction costs, overpriced service contracts, and developer kickbacks disguised as commissions." Henry shook his head. $700,000. That's nearly $6,000 per household. "Actually, it's worse," Paula corrected. "The inflated service contracts mean we're still being robbed every single month." Here's a legal nugget that most people don't realize. HOA board members have a fiduciary duty to protect homeowners' finances. Residents are entitled to detailed records and independent audits. Takeaway: if your HOA refuses transparency, it's usually because there's something worth hiding. Our approach had to be multi-pronged. File a criminal referral with the district attorney, pursue civil action to recover stolen funds, push governance reform to prevent future abuse, and most importantly, educate the community so they understood their rights. Step 1 was evidence preservation. I taught Paula to use professional case management software to catalog everything. Every suspicious invoice, every deposit, every inflated contract, cross-referenced and timestamped. Meanwhile, Alex became our digital intel officer, tracking Linda's social media activity. He was quick to point out that her posts about maintaining standards and problem residents created a tidy timeline of harassment that perfectly matched my financial findings. Step 2 was legal preparation. I retained Sarah Liu, a criminal defense attorney specializing in white-collar cases, not to defend me, but because she knew how prosecutors thought and how to structure an airtight case. "This is strong," she said after reviewing the files. "Financial fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy. The emails alone are prosecutorial gold. Add the pattern of retaliation, and you've got federal charges." Step 3 was community preparation. Henry scheduled a special meeting about financial transparency. On paper, the agenda looked routine, but we all knew it would be the battleground. I prepared presentation slides simple enough for every resident to grasp. Charts showing the $700,000 discrepancy, comparisons between what was paid versus what was delivered, and explanations of residents' legal rights. Paula built the accounting trail with surgical precision, and I drafted template letters residents could use to demand records and audits. The strategy was bulletproof. Every step legal, every action within our rights. Linda could retaliate all she wanted. She'd only be fighting homeowners exercising oversight. By the time we were ready to go public, we had enough evidence to make a prosecutor salivate and enough community support that Linda couldn't shut us down. The only question left was how much prison time she'd face once the dust settled. Linda's desperation showed the moment our public records request landed on her desk. Within 2 days, she called an emergency board meeting to propose new disruptive resident removal policies, with me as the obvious target. Her narrative was bold in its dishonesty. According to her, I was a mentally unstable widower using lawyer tricks to harass selfless volunteers and destabilize the community. She claimed my grief had made me paranoid and vindictive. The smear campaign spread like wildfire. Fake Facebook posts accused me of planning to sue individual homeowners. Whisper campaigns suggested I was having breakdowns. Neighbors were warned that my actions might increase everyone's insurance rates. Linda's masterstroke was coded language, comments about certain residents not fitting community values and the importance of protecting our way of life. She never said anything directly discriminatory. She was too cunning for that, but the implications were clear. I knew better than to take the bait. Instead of responding, I stayed focused on gathering evidence, documenting every word and action. 20 years in law taught me that bullies always escalate when cornered, and escalation leads to mistakes. The meeting she convened was standing room only. Word of her disruptive resident agenda had spread, and everyone wanted to see the showdown. The room reeked of nervous sweat and stale coffee. Linda presented her proposal. Fines of up to $1,000 for residents who undermined community harmony with frivolous complaints. When she finished, I calmly rose with my manila folder. "Before we consider penalties," I said, "let's talk about tonight's violations. Emergency meetings can't change policy without 7 days' notice. The disruptive behavior clause is unconstitutionally vague, and Texas property law requires due process in HOA enforcement. This proposal fails on all counts." Then I laid out the bigger picture. Documented harassment, intimidation tactics, drive-by surveillance, even attempts to weaponize city code enforcement against my family. The room went silent. Henry and Paula backed me, proving the board wasn't united behind her. Other members looked suddenly uneasy, realizing the decisions were being recorded for posterity. "Under pressure," Linda cracked. "This is exactly what I mean," she snapped. "Mr. Alvarez is using lawyer intimidation tactics to silence honest board members trying to protect this community from people who don't understand our standards." I kept my phone recording, letting her dig her own grave. After the meeting, where her proposals were narrowly voted down 5-2, she cornered me in the parking lot. My phone was still rolling. "Look, Daniel," she said, her voice oozing false concern. "Maybe we can settle this. The HOA budget has wiggle room. We could cover your pool upkeep, maybe landscaping, if you just drop these complaints. It was bribery, clear as day on tape. That's generous, Linda, I replied carefully. But transparency benefits the entire community. Her mask slipped. If you don't back off, you'll regret it. This community knows how to deal with troublemakers. And my husband has friends in city government who don't take kindly to residents wasting resources. The next morning, she filed a police report claiming I had threatened her in that very conversation. But I had audio proof of the opposite. When the officers showed up at 6 a.m., I greeted them with my recording. Their skepticism turned to disbelief, then anger. "Ma'am," one officer told her, "filing false reports is a crime. Don't do this again unless you have real evidence." Still, Linda wasn't finished. Facing exposure, she went scorched earth. She filed complaints with the city attorney, froze HOA accounts to block access to records, and pushed for emergency votes to oust Henry and Paula. She hoped to install a board that would shield her before prosecutors closed in. But by then, the story had grown too big to contain. Alex's live stream of the code enforcement debacle had gone viral. Local news picked it up as an exposé on HOA abuse. Channel 8 covered it in depth. Blogs, reform groups, even state lawmakers started citing our case. While Linda scrambled with interviews to salvage her image, I was delivering a detailed criminal complaint to the district attorney. Detective Sarah Liu from the DA's white-collar division took the lead. Within 2 days, subpoenas went out for HOA financials, developer contracts, and Linda's personal accounts. "This is substantial," she told me. "Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, even mail fraud. And with the obstruction attempts, we're looking at federal charges." Cornered, Linda lashed out with property damage, tampered pool equipment, broken windows, vandalism. But our security cameras caught enough footage to tie it back to her patrol allies. Meanwhile, Detective Liu uncovered even more. Inflated maintenance contracts, snow removal deals for a Texas community that barely sees snow, all with Linda's fingerprints on them. The special community meeting, required by state law, was scheduled for Saturday. Nearly 90 of the 127 households showed up, along with local reporters, detectives, Linda's defense attorney, and more live streams than the Wi-Fi could handle. Linda played the victim, claiming she was being persecuted for trying to maintain standards. She painted me as an unstable man using legal tricks to harass her. Then, I connected my laptop to the projector. Slide 1. The original $2.1 million amenity budget. Slide 2. The actual $1.4 million invoices. The $700,000 gap glowed red on the screen. Gasps filled the gym. "This isn't a personality clash," I said. "It's financial fraud." Then came the email. Linda's own words about profit-sharing arrangements. Silence swept the room. She broke. "Yes, I enforced rules against his nephew. If Daniel Alvarez wasn't so obsessed with destroying me, none of this would matter." Her voice rose as she slipped into something uglier. "I make no apologies for keeping certain elements from undermining what we've built here." Her racist undertones were unmistakable, caught live on dozens of phones. Detective Liu stood and addressed the crowd. "The district attorney has filed criminal charges. This is now an active investigation." By the time it ended, the community had turned. Residents stood one after another, sharing their own harassment stories. Applause erupted when Mrs. Lee declared, "In 60 years, I've never seen anyone work so hard to destroy the very community she claimed to protect." 6 months later, justice came full circle. Linda pled guilty to federal fraud, ordered to pay back $847,000 plus penalties. Her real estate license was revoked. Greg resigned from city council. Sunset Builders lost all city contracts after other neighborhoods uncovered similar scams. But the real victory wasn't just Linda's downfall. We reformed our HOA. Mandatory audits, transparent budgets, oversight committees, no more secret deals. Paula became president. Henry stayed on as treasurer. I took a volunteer role as compliance officer, channeling my skills into protecting neighbors instead of fighting contractors. The recovered funds paid for 3 years of HOA dues, community improvements, and even the Elena Alvarez Memorial Scholarship for local students pursuing engineering. Alex was the first recipient. Watching him accept that award reminded me why this fight mattered. Elena would have been proud. The neighborhood Linda tried to fracture now thrives. Families gather at the pool she once weaponized, laughter echoing where fear used to live. And the lesson endures. Document everything, know your rights, and never let bullies hide behind bylaws. 6 months later, the symmetry of justice was undeniable. Linda Morrison pled guilty to federal fraud charges, agreeing to full restitution plus penalties in exchange for avoiding trial. The final tally, $847,000 stolen plus interest and legal costs. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and her husband Greg quietly stepped down from city council once his role in shielding her came to light. Sunset Builders faced federal investigation and lost every municipal contract, as 3 other neighborhoods uncovered nearly identical schemes. But the bigger win was what we built from the ruins of her corruption. Our new bylaws required transparent financial reporting, oversight committees, and independent audits. No more secretive deals or inflated budgets. Every expense over $500 had to be approved publicly. Paula Reyes was elected HOA president, Henry Cole remained as treasurer, and I volunteered as compliance officer, channeling my experience into safeguarding the community. The recovered funds transformed Willow Creek. $400,000 covered HOA dues for 3 full years. Another $300,000 went toward real improvements, playground renovations, walking trails, and a community garden that now supplies fresh produce to the local food bank. The remaining $147,000 seeded the Elena Alvarez Memorial Scholarship for local students pursuing engineering. Fittingly, Alex was its first recipient. Watching him accept that award, tears in his eyes reminded me why fighting for justice mattered. Elena would have loved it. Personally, the battle gave me something I hadn't expected: healing. After Elena's death, I thought I'd never find purpose again. But standing up for my neighbors, using my skills to protect instead of just litigate, reconnected me to life. Our community meetings, once hostile, are now filled with cooperation and shared projects. Alex spent his last summer before college organizing pool parties for the kids, teaching them to swim, and reminding everyone that community spaces are for everyone, not weapons of control. The ripple effects went far beyond Willow Creek. Property law journals cited our case as a model for resident-led reform. State legislators used our story to push new HOA oversight bills. I even began hearing from homeowners across Texas who were fighting similar battles, and helping them felt like the most meaningful work of my so-called retirement. The transformation became visible at our first annual community pool party, held in Elena's honor. Families filled the pool deck with food, stories, and laughter. The sound of kids splashing in the water, the very pool Linda once tried to use as a weapon, became the soundtrack of our victory. "Uncle Daniel," Alex said quietly, as we watched neighbors laughing and swimming together, "Aunt Elena would be proud of what you built here." He was right. Together we had built something Elena would have cherished, a community founded not on fear, but on fairness, transparency, and mutual respect. So here's the takeaway. Know your rights, document everything, and never let anyone bully you into silence. Transparency isn't a threat, it's protection. And sometimes the best revenge is refusing to be quiet when you know the truth.